Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or you might be enjoying high tea. Because when you see this video, I'm not sure what time of day it is for you. For me, it's a lovely day at the moment. The sun is shining, it's very bright out. I have this lovely view overlooking the trees. All of that's not true because it's almost winter. But everything else I'm going to tell you is going to be true, and you're going to enjoy listening to this today. And the most important thing that you're going to remember about this is that I'm a fine lawyer. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about what we're going to do here today. We're going to talk about the most important thing that the company values, and the company values a respectful workplace. The reason the company values a respectful workplace is to ensure when you come to work, you do so both in safety and security, and when you're here, you enjoy yourself and that you focus on doing your job and not about feeling any lack of comfort because you've been harassed, because you've been treated badly. You need to feel secure in your job, and the result will be a great job for both yourself and for the company. Gatestone values respect and civility in the workplace. What is being civil in the workplace and what is being respectful in the workplace is the essence of what Gatestone is trying to say to all its employees, from the upper echelons to everybody in the corporation. And what really makes a great, respectful, and civil workplace is simply being kind and fair with your coworkers. A bill, that's legislation. The government passes legislation and it becomes a law. And we refer to the first aspect as Bill 168. And as you see on the slide, it came into force in 2010. Why did it come into force? Because there was a recognition by the government that we need to enshrine very critical principles of workplace violence and harassment, and we're doing it under the legislation called the Occupational Health and Safety Act. Now, Bill 132 has been introduced, and that deals with sexual harassment, and it deals with a little more detail about harassment in general. So what are we going to look at today? We're going to look first at Bill 168, and we're going to deal with Bill 132, which is the harassment and sexual harassment parts. And just as a general piece, you'll have a handbook, and in your handbook, it'll have the policies and procedures that will give you the details about what I'm talking about. So, what's workplace violence? It can be the simple exertion of force. We all know what that means. Or an attempt or a threat to exercise force against someone. Or a statement that's reasonable that somebody could interpret that you're going to threaten them physically. You don't have to threaten, you don't have to physically do something, but you can give the impression through your actions, through your body language, or through your words that in fact is going to happen. What's important is that long before the government legislated this, both workplace harassment and violence in the workplace, long before Bill 168 and Bill 132 came into force, the company recognized that they would have policies, principles, and procedures, which really, in a sense, the government's actually catching up with Gatestone. To make sure that everybody understands these principles, we'll go through them, and this is the why it's so important. Almost 1 in 5 violent incidents in Canada occur at work. It's a staggering number. 350,000 reported workplace incidents of violence. So if you think about those that aren't reported, you can see how large the number has to be. And it is a reality that it has a disproportionate impact on female employees, although male employees also are in the conundrum and also suffer from workplace violence. And of course, when there's workplace violence, everybody loses. No one can do their job properly, and it doesn't stand for our core values. It also deals with the reality that we know happens in our real lives outside our work. So the legislation was designed to take into account that there can be domestic violence. So if there's a scenario where there could be domestic violence, or you're afraid something has happened at home, we have an obligation to protect you and to make sure you feel secure. And how are we going to do that? Well, you're going to inform us that something has happened at home and we should know about it because there's a risk. There's a risk that your partner or spouse might come to the workplace and an event that is not pleasant might occur. So letting HR know, who will then evaluate the circumstances, but more probably will call the police. We would implement security measures. We would create a scenario where you can comfortably come to work. We have a very secure work environment, but on the other hand, nothing is perfectly secure. So we need to do things to help you if there are circumstances that require it. And hence, we would do a safety plan. Sometimes an employer is aware that there is an employee who has a particular history which has violence, which is connected to violence. That individual may never do another violent act, but if management becomes aware of that fact, we have an obligation, and we follow that very carefully to once again ensure that we have a safe work environment. Now, what would happen if you didn't feel it was safe? Common sense says if you don't feel secure, you are going to say, you know what? I don't feel secure. Here's why I don't feel secure. And you can say, I have a right because I don't feel secure because of circumstances to say I can't be at work or I can't be in that location today. So you have those rights. We want you to know you have those rights, and we're going to protect those rights, and we're going to make sure you're protected. And of course, HR is always critical to this piece. What happens in the circumstances? An investigation needs to take place. And until we do the investigation and determine that you're safe, we'll make sure that you're in a safe area, that you don't come to work that day, but we'll do something to protect you. And if necessary, you can feel the need to call the Ministry of Labor. That's your right, and you should exercise it if you feel it's appropriate, but only if you feel it's appropriate. Monitoring, reporting incidences. Obviously, a key component to this puzzle. OSHA requires us, that's remember the Occupational Health and Safety Act, to report and provide the information regarding any incidents of workplace violence. The employer must notify the Ministry of Labor, and an inspector may come to see and determine whether or not all the pieces of the puzzle to ensure safety are here. Now, we're going to talk about Bill 132. Bill 132 is legislation, and you can see in the red, if it's coming up in red, that September the 8th, the government passed this legislation into law, and it had been discussed for a considerable period of time, and it deals with, and it's very important, the title here, it is Sexual Violence and Harassment Action Plan Act, supporting survivors and challenging sexual violence and harassment, and has now been passed into law and it is now incumbent in every workplace that this is the mantra. Again, there's nothing different or unusual about this piece of legislation that Gatestone hasn't already been doing. So here's a definition designed by lawyers to create a little bit of, wow, this is serious stuff. Workplace sexual harassment is now specifically defined as follows. Engaging in a course of vexatious comment. Okay, what's vexatious comment? It's those words which you know and I know make somebody uncomfortable. So it's vexatious because it's mean-spirited, it's not appropriate, and you know the recipient is not going to like it. It's easy. The things your parents taught you not to say. Or against a worker in a workplace, obviously, because of their sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, where the course of comment or conduct is known or ought reasonably to known. Ought reasonably to known has a broad meaning, because you might say, well, I don't think he's offended because I referred to a certain aspect of that individual, a part of his body or part of her body. She's not offended, he's not offended, but what would a reasonable person, wouldn't they be offended? So hence, ought reasonably be known. And that's a key, because it's not the test of what you and a friend might think. That's not the test. It's what a reasonable person in circumstances would think. As well, making a sexual solicitation or advance, where the person making the solicitation or advance is in a position to confer, grant, deny a benefit or advancement to a worker, and the person knows or ought reasonably to know that solicitation or advance is unwelcome. What's workplace harassment? Engaging in a coarse, vexatious comment or conduct against a worker that is known or ought reasonably known to be unwelcome. And the test is not that that might be your friend and it's okay. That's not the answer. The answer is, would a third party, a straw person, a reasonable person, think that's unwelcome? The law is very clear. I have to manage my business, you have to manage your business, and in managing a business, we can expect that from time to time, we may have things to tell you that aren't great in terms of your performance. We hope that's never the case. So it's not harassment in the workplace for a supervisor to say the job you're doing is not focused. It's not a good job. We don't expect our supervisors to do it in a manner which is unfair, or we don't expect anybody to yell at you, but we do expect that you will receive over the course of your career constructive comment, and it may be constructive criticism, but that's okay. That is not harassment, and the law makes it very clear that it's not harassment. Examples of reasonable management include, but aren't limited to, decisions and communications regarding your job duties, instruction, evaluation, inspections, performance, attendance and punctuality, disciplinary action, layoffs, reorganizations. That's not harassment. It's perfectly fine and is recognized as such. We have a written program. It'll be part of your materials, and you'll see in that written program that we're not only complying with the general tenor of the law, we actually have always done it, and we actually exceed it. It includes measures and procedures for workers to report incidences of harassment. That's important. Nobody can fix a problem if you don't tell us. Nobody can fix a problem if we don't understand it. Nobody can do anything to assist you, be it from a violence scenario, potential violence scenario, harassment scenario, if you don't advise us. You have to say, I'm being made uncomfortable, and you have to tell us. You have to report the issue. And if you do, we'll take steps to investigate. And why will we take steps to investigate? Because we have an obligation to you, to your fellow employees, and to the employees that you don't even know yet who might be subject to harassment if this matter isn't brought to a head. What's a management program? What do we want to know? We want to understand what's happened. How are we going to understand what happened? Well, obviously, we're going to collect information. So key is we need facts. We don't need lengthy diatribes. We need facts, and we can't work without them. Though we're going to have to disclose. It's not appropriate to say, oh, I want to tell you I've got this problem and so is harassing me, but you can't do anything about it. Well, of course we have to do something about it. The law makes us required to do something about it. Gatestone wants something to be done about it. You don't have to ever suffer and say to us, well, I just want you to know this, but don't do anything. What we're going to do in practice is we're going to investigate, and then if you're the recipient of that harassment, we are going to tell you what the outcome is. We are going to tell you what the recommended solution is, and we are going to give you advice as to how this is going to be rectified going down the road. If you don't feel you have solved your problem or the investigation hasn't been appropriate, you have a right, as every worker in this province has a right, to ask the Ministry of Labour to look at it. But I can assure you that our goal is to investigate, to do it properly, to do it thoroughly, and to ensure that nothing is swept under the table. We're training you. We'll continue to train you. Your manuals, your employee manuals are always available to you. If you don't understand something, you can go to HR. HR assures me that they'll always be there and available to you if you misunderstand or need some help in this area. What are the harmful consequences? We don't want this to happen to you. We don't want you to be in a situation where you go home and you're miserable because your workplace has made you miserable because someone has been picking on you. And I always love this little picture because it tells you, nothing tells you what these pictures can tell you. And what do these pictures tell you? What's common and what would look like workplace harassment? You've got the physical, you've got the verbal, you've got the nonverbal, and the physical, really easy. The last time I checked, this isn't an environment where you should be hugging everybody you see. This isn't a good idea. It's probably going to cause the person who receives the hug some feeling of, I don't like this. And even if they say, oh, I always like to give somebody a hug when I see them and I haven't seen them for a month, they've just come back from holidays, not a good idea. Nobody wants to be touched if they don't want to be touched. And the safe way of working in an environment is not to touch anyone inappropriately. Yes, of course, there's inadvertence and there's the odd scenario that could evolve, but generally, 99.9% of the time, nobody needs to be touched, groped, or bumped into. Verbal. No, I'm not interested in jokes that demean someone's character. I'm not interested in jokes that talk about one nationality or another nationality. And I always joke, as the great joke is, lawyers are still cannon fodder and you can make fun of us all you like. And you can also make fun of politicians all you like. But besides that, where you came from, how you dress, is not a laughing matter. And the nonverbal, leering. What's leering? Leering is really simple. I don't have to explain that to you because you all know when you have been the victim of somebody looking at you the way they shouldn't be looking at you. Sending porn. It's not a good idea to send porn, receive porn on your personal iPhones or Blackberries. That's not a good idea. It's never acceptable in the workplace, ever. It's not appropriate to text messages which aren't appropriate. It's never appropriate. It's not maybe, it's never. The word zero tolerance is what you need to be thinking of. Cyber messages, harassment, social media. We all think that somehow Facebook and all these things are not, we can do what we like, but guess what? You have people at work who are on your Facebook. You have people who can access your Facebook. That becomes part of your work. Becomes part of your work when you go downstairs and you get coffee. It doesn't matter whether you're in the four corners of our office space or you're downstairs getting coffee or you're in the parking lot or the bus stop. You're all part of our family, and members of families don't treat each other like that. The key to all this is thank you. The more important key to this is just come to work, enjoy yourself, you'll be successful, actually be kind to the people you work with, and thank you again for taking the time out of your day to listen to my information.